So if you haven't watched it yet, I made a video a few weeks ago shooting a professional real estate video with the Sony FX30. I got a lot of great feedback on the video. If you haven't watched it yet, I do encourage you to go ahead and do so. Someone commented on that video and actually made a great point, and I thought I would share my thoughts with you about this comment. He asked me, if I owned the A7 IV already, why would I go and buy the Sony FX30? And I just figured that I should share those thoughts with you as to why I decided to buy this instead of like an A7 III, an A7C, or even another A7 IV. So if you're not familiar with me or what I do, I am a video content producer here in Baltimore, Maryland. I do a lot of real estate, I do a lot of weddings, some small business stuff. I do music videos from time to time, mostly a lot of small productions like one-man gang type things. Everything's a lot of run and gun. I don't have big production team or anything like that. So having small mirrorless cameras actually makes the most sense for my type of business. So I'm someone who actually likes to have two cameras at all times, whether it be just a backup, whether it be for behind the scenes, whether it be for a second angle doing interview shots, a second angle at ceremonies. It's just nice to have a second camera at all times, especially when you're running and gunning and you just don't know what could possibly happen. So I was considering getting either another A7 IV, an A7C, or potentially like a used A7 III as a backup camera. But then they announced the Sony FX30. And when I heard the specs and actually saw the camera, it made complete sense for me to want this camera over all the other ones. Number one, the price. I mean, the price is ridiculous for what you're getting for this camera. So this camera does essentially almost everything that the A7 III does, other than maybe the picture side of it, but for $700 less for me. I didn't pick up the top handle because I don't do a whole lot of XLR stuff. For $1,800, this camera is ridiculous, guys. Even if you see the specs and you see the videos that are being made with it, it's one of those cameras that you really don't understand how good it is until you actually get it in your hands. There are a ton of features about this that I love. A few of them that I really love is the tally lights. As cliche as it sounds, these tally lights are actually incredible. I love that I just know when I'm filming at all times. Being able to upload your own LUTs into this is incredible. Obviously the autofocus is incredible. The ability to use the full frame glass that I've already purchased for the A7 IV on this camera is another big plus for me. I don't really want to invest heavy in APS-C glass, so I just use all of my full frame glass on this, with the exception of buying the 11mm 1.8, and that's for vlogging or my real estate shoots in case I need to do something with this as opposed to the A7 IV. I'm actually considering potentially changing completely over to the FX30 for my real estate shoots, just because I really enjoyed that 4K 60 10-bit. It's really nice and no crop. The experience of shooting real estate with this has been really great so far. Also, the fact that this has so many cinema features in it that are in like the FX3, the Sony FX6, including like the Cine EI and some of the other workflows and menus that it has in here. It's just really nice that it's geared more towards a video content producer. Honestly, because of the fact that it's so geared to video, it makes me want to pick this up more than my A7 IV, just basically because the user experience for shooting video is so much better. The more that I shoot with this camera and my A7 IV, the more I realize that there's not much to distinguish between the two of them. Unless you're a hybrid shooter, I almost would recommend getting the FX30 over the A7 IV just because of the way that it's set up for video. You're not losing that much dynamic range, if any at all. I mean, honestly, the comparisons that I see, it's not quite much at all that I'm seeing, at least that's usable in like an everyday situation. The one con is, yes, the low light is not as good as like an A7 IV, but if you're not someone who shoots in low light all the time, like, and I'm talking like no light, I mean, because you can shoot, the other base ISO is 2500, and you're getting a very clean image at that. It does make sense a lot of times to have two cameras that are basically exactly the same. That way, if one goes down, you have another one that's just ready to go, the exact same workflow and everything. But it's also nice to have tools that can do different things. I like the fact that this is an APS-C because it does give me more options when I put my lenses on here. For instance, if I have my 20mm f1.8 on here, it's more like a 30mm, maybe 32mm after having the active stabilization on. That basically feels like it gives me two separate lenses. Yes, the A7 IV can shoot in crop mode, but it's just easy to know that if I want to have my 24-70 on my A7 IV and put the 20mm or the 50mm on here, it just gives me like a different look. One of the last and final reasons why I picked up the Sony FX30, honestly, it's just cool. I mean, let's be honest, the camera looks cool. I mean, it looks exactly like an FX3. It looks like a cinema camera, and I love that. I'm a big sucker for the looks of things. I like things that are sleek. I like things that are streamlined. I like things that look like you spent money on it. I know that's kind of a terrible way to do things, but let's be honest, a lot of us do that. And when we're out here and we're going in front of clients, those things kind of matter sometimes. I mean, it might not seem like it matters, but when people see you with stuff that looks like something they're not used to seeing, they just think that they're getting their money's worth when they actually are paying you to do things. So for me, having the Sony A7 IV and the FX30 is a perfect 1-2 combo. I don't do many photo jobs anymore, but it is nice to be able to have that, even for taking pictures of the family or just with my kids. So who would I recommend the Sony FX30 to? Anybody who's a beginner filmmaker, anyone who's a seasoned filmmaker looking for a B camera, anyone who is looking to get into the Sony lineup and wants the cheapest and best camera they can buy. I think the Sony FX30 is the perfect option. Now, if you are someone who does exclusively weddings and you have it in the budget, I would probably go for the A7 IV, just because you can crank that ISO and not worry about it. Sometimes you just don't get to control the situation, especially if you do events, weddings, things like that. You can't control the situation, and having the ability to rely on the ISO is big. For example, I did a event this past weekend, and certain areas were just not good lighting at all. I had to be at around 8,000 ISO, and if I were on 8,000 ISO on the FX30, it'd probably be decent, maybe usable, but with the A7 IV, it's clean, and it's not even fair. It's cheating at this point. So don't get it twisted. The low light on the FX30 is very good, especially compared to a lot of the cameras that have been out over the past couple of years, or even cameras that have come out this year, like the Panasonic GH6. It's better than the Panasonic GH6 in low light, and that camera is amazing. I love that camera, but for my workflow, the Sony system just made more sense. I highly recommend the FX30. It makes so much sense at this price point. So I'm hoping this video was helpful. I hope that I helped you understand why someone who owns an A7 IV or even in like an FX3, Sony A7S3 would want to pick up a Sony FX30. If you have any questions regarding the FX30 or the A7 IV, please leave a comment down below. I'd also love to hear from you. What do you guys think of the Sony FX30? Have you tried it? Do you want to try it? I'd love to hear in the comments below. If you enjoyed this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.